Good evening, and welcome to the evening edition of Soluble, America's Political Central. We're going to continue with part two of our discussion from earlier this morning with the costs and causes of a failed democracy. As a refresher, and from this morning, and as I said, we experienced all of this. The causes are the things that happen that cause a democracy to fail, or the signs of a failed democracy are you have a leader who's in denial of the outcome of the legitimacy of its political opponents, the curtailing of civil liberties on your opponents and the media, the encouragement or toleration of violence. And as I said, we've seen all of this transpire over the course of the last administration. Now, people must remember, we all know this president had blood on his hands, but it wasn't even a matter of months in the office before this began to happen. People forget the stabbing on the Portland Light Rail from a young man who stabbed two men because they was defending two young ladies' rights to wear the headwear of their choice in a free country. So this was the first occasion of political violence that was encouraged by a sitting president. The very first time on American soil where you've had this to happen. And this is mainly going on. The main reason why it's happening is because of a failure to go out and vote in large numbers by the opposing party or by people who love democracy or the people who love Republican leaders who are nominated who have the common sense of how democracy works. Now you have to ask yourself, is America greater now than it was in 2016? Are we greater? The Supreme Court tainted from lies, from hypocrisy. So Democrats, we have to understand, no, we can't get down in the mud with Republicans as they go low and lower and lower. But we must stand firm for the rule of law, fairness. Something that the Republicans care very little about. It's not about being fair. It's about what can I do at the end of the day to win. Now, as I said, you have two parties here, Democrats and Republicans. The Republicans have to come out now and show the American people they are a party for democracy and not a party for autocracy, because we live in a democratic republic. We live in a democracy. And in that democracy, in all cases, the majority rules. So you have to ask yourself, okay, what's happened? When you don't go out and vote in a majority, in major numbers, then the minority rules. And that's where we're at now. Because we haven't went out and voted effectively on a regular basis in large numbers, in major numbers, the minority is ruling. That's how it happens, by not exercising your right to vote. Because every non-vote on the Democratic side is a plus vote for the Republicans. It's just that simple. The things that are happening in American politics today, with the tainting of the Supreme Court, the invasion of Ukraine, the total flub when it comes to handling of the coronavirus, these things are happening in America not because the majority is ruling. It's not the will of the majority. These things are happening because the minority is in charge, because the majority of people in America didn't vote. Let's take a deep dive. It's time for harsh truths. As I said, the Republicans were in Ukraine over the weekend with a delegation. Did they assure President Zelensky that in 2024 there would be no ticket with Donald Trump on it in no shape, fashion, or form. Did they apologize for the way he handled the aid package that was set aside for Ukraine? Looking for a bribe, looking for something in return, and holding the money and the will of the American people hostage for a personal favor. This is not democracy. And if the Republican Party don't put someone in charge who's capable of understanding how democracy works, this thing will continue unless we vote. Now, we have to vote in large numbers because they're determined to stop the vote at all costs. They know it's a change in demographic. This is not some phantom boogeyman who's coming from overseas, South American countries. There's always a scare tactic, as I said. The truth of the matter is there's a change in demographic. The voting demographic in America is changing. And the Republicans can't, won't, are afraid, incapable of making the case on the campaign trail. They're a party of low taxes, strong military. Okay, what? Make the case. Make the case. Let's see if this is a party that is a walking and talking contradiction based on what it says it stands for and what it actually does when it's in office. A deep dive into a harsh truth. The Republican Party says that it's not a party that is racist. When? Why? Isn't there ever been a minority on the Republican ticket in the last 40 years, say? In my lifetime, since I got old enough to understand politics, I haven't seen a minority on the ticket. But yet it's not a racist party. So I guess what the Republican Party is telling us is that there's no minority that is qualified, that is not capable. Not one has ever been put on the ticket. Yet this is not a racist party. Condoleezza Rice, Ben Carson, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Parrish Denard, Armstrong Williams, as of late, Kathy Barnett. Where and why can't we find a minority in this party that says it's not a racist party? Can we find somebody a minority who's even qualified to be on the ticket in the form of a VP, in the form of a running mate? We'll give you administrative roles. We'll give you a position in the cabinet. But we're not a racist party. It's only going to hurt America if instead of putting the best qualified candidate in office for the job, we put the best Caucasian that one can find in office for the job. It's only going to hurt America. Because if the best person qualified to run the Oval Office and be commander-in-chief is not actually in office, then it's a negative for America. And that's what we've seen for the last 4 years. So as I said, you have a party here that is, by all accounts, by all verbal testimonies from said party, that it's not a racist party. No minority on the ticket, as you were. No qualified minority can they find to place on the ticket. This has got to be hogwash. This has got to be hogwash. When the Democrats put a minority on the ticket and put in the head of the ticket, and he actually inherited the Oval Office, America remained intact for those 8 years. There was no takeover. There was no replacement of Caucasians and promoting of Negroes to overthrow to diminish the power of. We put the best qualified person in office, whether it was male or female. We put the best qualified person in office, and we watched the will of the American people attempted to be executed. But as I said, he couldn't get a lot done because we failed him in the midterms. If you recall, his term was, I got a shellacking. Not because the majority of the people were against President Obama. And once again, it's because the majority of the people didn't go to the polls in the midterms, didn't go to the ballot box in the midterms as they did in the general election that put him in office. So we don't want the Republicans to create these artificial facts or bogus talking points that, well, if we could find a qualified minority, who's qualified to lead the country and to take the Republican agenda and go with it. We just can't find him. Or if we did, or if we could, we would put him on the ticket. So all you Republicans, all you so-called minority Republicans, some of whom I just named, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You can only be on the ticket. You can only be in an administrative role. You can only be in the cabinet somewhere as an aide or an assistant aide. That's what the Republican Party is saying. That you can't be on the ticket simply because you're a minority. Me personally, I think there are plenty of qualified so-called minority Republicans. Rubio is a solid candidate. He's better than Trump. Ted Cruz, as hard as this is to say, he's better than Donald Trump. And that's saying a lot for Ted Cruz. That is really saying a whole lot from the distinguished senator from Texas. So let's see what they're going to do. Let's see what happens. Will the so-called minorities that are in the Republican Party who vote Republican, will they stand idly by why the best Caucasian is in office, and not the actual best person for the job, whether it be male or female? This is where we're at today. This is where we're at. We're in a state of turmoil, in a state of back and forth, in a state of gridlock. Because simply on our side, the solution on the Democratic side is to vote. Is to vote. And that's the only way to put an end to this. Negroes in America, the voting laws are being changed. They're being rewritten. The districts are being chopped up. They're being gerrymandered. They're taking it to the courts to get it approved. Because they know that if you use your power, which is your vote, that you can stop this. Imagine that. Imagine going to the polls every election cycle in huge numbers. Just take time to imagine that for a few seconds. When you do that, there's no more protesting because you've got these people out of office who you disagree with, who are promoting bad policy in America. You've gotten them out of office. Imagine that. No more protesting because they don't care about that. They don't have no understanding for that. You can march till your feet are sore, bleeding. How long have Negroes been marching in this country? What has it changed? On the contrary, think about the times where you went to the polls in large numbers. What did it change? You saw immediate change. You saw your vote, which is your power, bring immediate change to the desired officials that you want in office. You were able to vote them in. And there was nothing that could stop it. because it's all framed on the Constitution. And it works. It works. No more protesting. We're tired. We have other things to be doing. So in order to enjoy the fruits of our labor, to not have to be bothered about protests, it's grueling. It's tiresome. It's been a long struggle. And you have to have the common enough sense now, the wherewithal to know that if you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, we have to vote. To put ourselves on the right side of history when there is an insurrection or an attempted coup d'etat. We will be on the right side of history. The world is watching to see what happens in this fledgling democracy. And it's fledgling because you don't go and vote in the right numbers. So it makes it appear as though we have a system where the majority is ruling, but at the same time, the country is in a state of discontent. Think about that. A government of the people, for the people, by the people. You can't be discontent when you go out and you vote your desired candidates, nominees into office, and they go into office, they go to Washington, they go up on Capitol Hill and do the things that you sent them up there to do. There can't be no discontentment with that. So you have to understand where it all comes from. Where it all comes from. It's a mountain that's been formed out of a molehill. But to get back to the simple molehill that it is, it's all about voting. It's all about voting. Every 4 years in November, or every 2 years in November, whatever it calls for, whether it's federal or local. You can phone your elected officials. You can write your elected officials. You have the right to peaceably assemble. You have a right to a petition of grievances from your elected officials. But if you don't exercise all of your rights that are guaranteed to you in the Bill of Rights, then that's where you're at. That's why you're stuck in the rut that you're in. There is all the discontentment. There is a tainted Supreme Court. There is a country in turmoil where democracy is on the brink. If you don't want to pay the cost for a failed democracy, you have to vote. Now we're paying the cost now. It's not a high cost. But if we don't go to the polls, then the price is going to go up. And it's going to go up in a way where the bill gets too expensive to pay with just a simple vote. With the direction that the Republicans are pushing the country, you may have to pay with the price of blood. That's not of your choosing. So you have to vote. You have to vote your choice of commander-in-chief in office, your choice of senator or congressman. And then the commander-in-chief controls the military, which controls the tempo, which controls the ebb and flow of democracy that we're all sworn to defend from enemies, foreign and domestic. We have to vote. This weekend, we had the Buffalo 10. Now, in the Republicans' mind, it's not a big deal. It could be to them. It's a phantom, another phantom boogeyman. It's something that the federal government has cooked up. It's not real. It's very real. And so I say to these minorities in the Republican Party, We're going to see if you're going to be placed on the ticket anytime soon in the form of president or vice president. May the best man win. May the best man who can promote the Republican agenda for the American people. If the best man is not in the seat, if the best man is not in the Oval Office, then we see a decline. If any of these minorities who are in the Republican Party, who I've just mentioned, had you been in Buffalo this weekend, this past Saturday, shopping at the Tops grocery store, could you have been in the number? Could you have been in the number? Because this young man seemed to have an agenda of killing anything that he saw or any person he saw with brown skin. Excuse me. So it's now or never to prove whether your party is true or false when it comes to not being a racist party. This great replacement theory has spun off of the MAGA movement. This is ultra MAGA at its finest. Make America great again. How? We went from the nonsense of a fake birth certificate or birtherism, if you will, to where we are now. And we allowed a real estate crook, reality show president into the Oval Office. And this is where we're at now. This is where we're at. It's not making America great. What makes America great is a strong and functioning democracy. A democracy and a government that's functioning off of the will of the people. So it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get no better. You're going to only get more of the same. The Republican playbook is open. The Democratic playbook is open, for that matter. We don't want to give our Democratic elected officials a swift kick in the rear, but we send you up to do a job. Must we lose faith? Is that the answer? Should we lose the faith? No. We should vote harder now with the way that the voting laws in this country are under attack. We should vote harder now and demand that the leaders that we send up to Washington, D.C. do their job. That is the soluble solution for us. We hope and pray that the Republicans will come back around to reasoning, understanding, and accepting a more honest, democratic form of government, and not letting something like the big lie be promoted and win out. Because it only makes you look bad. Where you're at. In the campaign, during the campaign, the nominee, who eventually became 45, said that, he encouraged his followers and supporters to jump on the protesters. The people that came to his rallies in disagreement, he encouraged them to assault them, rough them up. I'll get my attorneys out there for you. Don't worry about nothing. So you ask some of these insurrectionists from January the 6th, if you know them, if you see them, if you associate with them, you ask them, what has 45 contributed financially to your legal woes? And if you want to go for a phony baloney continually, be on the wrong side of history, so be it. That'll be your regret. If you live to see old age, that'll be your regret. This party is all over the place. If there are protests going on across America because of injustices, brutality that's being committed by some bad officers, then they're pro-police all over. Back to blue, regardless. Those people were resisting arrest. They were high on drugs. In some kind of way, it was their fault. Never would the cops do this. It's their fault, some kind of way. We backed the blue. What about a Capitol Hill police officer? If you're backing the blue, you're backing them all the way. You can't pick and choose. You can't play both sides of the fence. Officer Sicknick's mother had to go to Capitol Hill to practically beg Republican lawmakers to do the right thing. But yet they backed the blue. As I said, the playbook is open. It's wide open. I'm opening it up for you to see it. It started with Willie Horton and scare tactics there about Michael Dukakis letting guys out on parole or on weekend leave, and they're going to commit more crimes. And the scare tactic worked. Dukakis was defeated soundly. But it's not the case every single time. They can't get enough of it. But you have to realize, the American public, the American electorate, the voting bloc, the voting body of America, if the Republicans are dumb for continually pulling this out of their playbook, you're even dumber. Because you're going for it. You're going for it. And it's causing you either to vote with this party who's using these scare tactics while they laugh behind your back, thinking you're suckers in any kind of way. They're laughing behind your back because you're going for it. How much longer? The playbook is open. It's up to you to look into the pages and read and see what's going on. If the Republicans are dumb for using these tactics, phantom boogeymans, all kind of propaganda, all kind of needless investigations that waste taxpayer money, then, as I said, you're dumber. They're not going to stop. The only way they can be stopped is to vote them out of office. To vote them out of office. That's the only way it's going to stop. We have our two senators, Manchin and Sinema. We need our fellow West Virginians and fellow Arizonians to send a message. We have great legislation in place. We shouldn't have to be ashamed of it or have to defend it. The majority, the will of the people, sent these elected officials to Washington to get this job done. So we don't have to defend it. We don't have to apologize. We don't have to make all kind of outlandish concessions if that's not the will of the American people. We need to stand firm on democratic principle. We need to stand firm on representing the working class in America. The cost of a failed democracy is an expensive cost. And that cost can't be paid in financial dollars. It can't be paid in sacrificing of blood. And if we don't go to the polls, we're going to be in a system of constant disarray until democracy totally erodes, totally fails. And then we're in a state of anarchy. One of the greatest political systems known to mankind. Let's be honest. The sheer ingenuity of Caucasian males that crafted this form of government. That's just what it was. It was borderline genius. For us to let that slip through our fingers and not continue to exercise it, not continue to practice it, will be a total failure, be a total catastrophe. It'll be a total disaster for mankind. It's something, democracy is something that's fragile. It's just like a piece of furniture, any material object that you love, your car. You constantly want to keep it washed. You want to keep it shined up. You want to keep the wheels looking neat. You want to be under the hood, keeping it running good, keeping it well tuned up. But that's what one has to do with a functioning democracy. You have to constantly groom it. You have to constantly participate in uplifting it through voting, through debating, through advocating. The cost of a failed democracy. We don't have to pay that cost. We don't have to pay that cost if we go out and vote. If we don't, it's going to be a high cost to pay. It's going to be the end of one of the best known governments to mankind. Now is not the time to be discouraged. Now is the time to be encouraged. Encouraged to go out this November and exercise. That right. The primaries are upon us. 45's tentacles still run deep in the Republican Party, deep as they ever were. The Republicans have it all wrong. So let's do what we can, or try to do our best to bring them back to the right side of history. They're disillusioned with these phantom boogeymen, these dark conspiracies. Here they go again. It's all in the playbook. Let's come up with scare tactics that will scare them into the polls, that will scare them into believing whatever cockamamie story we come up with. This is a non-racist party. This is a party of the American melting pot with inclusion for all. Let's see if they're going to come out against this shooting, against this racist act towards American citizens. Let's see if they're going to come out hard against this shooting, this racist act of violence, killing old women. Let's see if they're going to come out against this act as hard as they come out against wokeism. That's on the forefront of their radar now. Wokeism. If a person is showing you or telling you who they are, believe them. Believe them the first time. Here it is again, an opportunity on a silver platter for the Republican Party to come out and show that it's on the right side of history. To show that they believe these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They're all over the place against wokeism. Once again, creating these phantom and phony boogeymen, these scare tactics. When in reality, the Republicans run from the truth. They're twisted. They're spinning, which is another tactic they like to go to in the playbook. Chapter 3, page 15. Spin. Spin and spin again. Spin so hard till you make them dizzy. And if they do go into the ballot box in November, we'll have them spending so hard that they would have no other choice. They wouldn't want nothing no better than to vote Republican, and we got them again. Go to the playbook, spend. That's another go-to. The voting season is upon us. The primaries are here. It's in your hands. We have to send another message. And we have to treat this right to vote as something personal and sacred, more precious than gold. Because it gives you your livelihood. It gives you your way of life in this democracy. And for Negroes in America, we owe it to the ones who are on the other side now, who fought for the right to vote, who died for the right to vote. And we owe it to the young people in America, the young people of color in America today. So they do not have to fight this fight. So they can exercise and practice democracy freely and in a comfortable state of mind. That's the only way they can give their best contribution to democracy. So we have to vote. It's all in our hands now. Imagine, like I said, no more protesting. No more discontent from unfairness in the system. Whether it be discrimination in housing, discrimination in the workplace. Riding the backs of the working man while the rich are getting off scot-free. Let's take a long look at it. Let's take a deep dive. It's time to deal with harsh truths. The MAGA movement is spurring and bringing on things like what happened this past Saturday in Buffalo. This is the dog whistle for Make America Great Again. This is the dog whistle. When America, at a time when America was putting, instead of putting the best man in office, they was putting the best Caucasian in office. That didn't make America great. It didn't make America great. There was still turmoil in the country. There was still lies in the government, hypocrisy in the government, because the best person for the job wasn't the one that was in office. And it wasn't because of the will of the majority of the people. We've been disfranchised in this country for a long time when it comes to having the right to vote, being able to go into the polls, into the voting booth and exercise our choice. Now is the time. Nothing is holding you back now. So there is no excuse, especially for people of color in America. It should be ironic. It is somewhat ironic that now democracy hangs in the balance. And it's not the vote of the Caucasian America that's going to swing that pendulum, swing that balance back to a righteous level, a righteous center level that represents the will of the American people. It's going to be the power of the vote for minorities in America, largely Negroes. It's ironic that we're going to have to save democracy from Caucasians who, in their sheer ingenuity, as I said, has crafted this great form of government. But now that the numbers are not there, there's a change in demographic. Let's throw democracy out the window now. And we use the power of the bullet. That sentiment has us going nowhere fast. is dangerous. And as I said, it's got us going nowhere fast. This cost of a failed democracy doesn't have to be paid in blood. It doesn't have to be paid in racial turmoil, economic failure, inflation. But you must exercise your right to vote. The other party is full of technology, full of lies, full of misleading information. They don't want you to trust the very government that's made up of everyday people like yourself. And that's ludicrous. The government is of the people. And people have a heart, people have a conscience. So if they go out on the campaign trail and make the case, then I can believe that. I can go with that. I can look a man in his eye and pretty much see where he's coming from, no matter what his lips are saying or what his tongue is saying when it moves. And I think the American people have that same level of intellect also. So at the end of the day, if we don't want to pay this cost of a failed democracy, we want to restore the Supreme Court to a level of respect, to a place of nonpartisanship. We have to vote. We see that nothing that is coming from the side of the Republicans, what can we trust? As I said, the distinguished senator for Kentucky said that if there was a vacancy on the Supreme Court in an election year, then the will of the American people should be respected, and let the next president, let him fill the vacancy. These words are meaningless. And now here we are with 3 Supreme Court justices put into office by one president. That rarely happens. There's hardly any way that can happen unless there's some shenanigans, some cheating, some underhandedness going on. Now you have these 3 presidents who sat before a judicial committee and said Roe was precedent. Casey versus Planned Parenthood was precedent on top of precedent. 3 nominees to sit on this high court all testified to that fact. I don't know if they was on the oath. I don't know what the whole process is there for when you get in the chair and you go before the Judicial Committee for Supreme Court hearings. But they all stated that Roe was precedent. And Casey versus Planned Parenthood was precedent on top of precedent. So how are we here? Let me tell you why we're here and how we got here. Because you're not exercising your right to vote as Democrats. So in closing, this is going to be the cost of a failed democracy. Devaluation of currency, anarchy, and a way of life, a quality way of life that diminishes, if not vanishes altogether. And it's simple. Instead of going through all of that, it's simple. Just go out and vote. Just go out and vote. It's not too late. But it is now or never. Democracy is on the brink. Protesting won't get it. Protesting won't get it. Look how long you've been protesting. Look how much you've protested. It's simple. We either vote in large numbers, We vote on a regular basis. We take the vote as something sacred, something that's near and dear, something that our existence depends upon, something that our preservation depends upon. Is if we don't take it serious in that manner, in that regard, then we lose it. And then we lose all that we've gained. We have nothing to prove. We just need to go to the polls. It's all on the Republicans. The ball is in their court. As I said, if it's not a racist party, where's the minority that's on the ticket? When will we see it? Will we see it? Is there no qualified minority? Make the case. Let the Republican leadership come out, whether it be leaders in the Senate, whether it be leaders in the House, whether it be Republican think tanks, whether it be the chairman of the Republican Party. Let them come out and make the case as to why and how that if they're not a racist party, there's no minority on the ticket. There hasn't been a minority on the ticket in the last 40 years. But this is not a party of racists. And as I said, all these minority Republicans, what can you do? What can you do? Can you stand on republicanism, conservatism, small government? Can you stand on that as the head? As the one leading the charge? Or could you just be a cheerleader, a face in the crowd of a party that doesn't even respect you as a person, doesn't see you in their heart of hearts as a human being? Put a minority on the ticket. Let's prove it. Let's prove it. That's the only way to prove it. You have them. They're qualified. They've studied law. Some of them did service in the military. If they're of Hispanic, if they're of Negro origin, they're still Constitution-loving Americans. And if they're running, let's look at not the color of their skin, not their ethnicity. Let's look at their qualifications to hold this office. Let's look at that and that only. That and that only. And that'll pretty much squash the argument. That'll pretty much kill the debate on whether or not this is a party of racists. That's a painful allegation to make, because we would hope in our heart of hearts, from fellow man to fellow man, that we would try to look at the best and brightest in humanity and bring out the best in whatever race, whatever ethnicity of the said nominee, the said candidate, and not what they look like from a physical point of view, from a physical standpoint. Look at their intellect. Look at their capabilities, their qualification, their educational background, their commitment to service. Look at their criminal history. Look at anything that you want to look at that could qualify or disqualify them. And if you don't find nothing disqualifying on this particular person who just so happened to be some ethnicity other than Caucasian, then put them on the ticket. Let them be the nominee of the party. And until that happens, then yeah, you do have something to prove. You do have something to prove that you're not a racist party. Because 45 wasn't the best man for the job. He was Caucasian, and he did pass the test on those grounds alone. But if that's not The only thing that you see that can qualify a person to run on the Republican ticket, then put a minority there. Because as I said, you have Senators Rubio, Senators Cruz, Dr. Carson, who I think would have all led America down a better democratic path than Donald John Trump. So here we go. In closing, the primaries are upon us. And here we are in the thick of it. We're going to see if the Republicans can make the case. So join us on the next time, on the next Soluble broadcast, where we'll go into all the ins and outs and all the avenues of what the Republican Party stands for versus what the Democratic Party stands for. And if you are looking for the solution from the Republican point of view, make the case to the American voter. Don't promote the big lie. Down with the conspiracy theories. When you're winning, everything is legitimate. Everything is working. But somehow, if you're losing, whether it's in the polls, whether you're doing bad, running up to the election, and the polls are not in your favor, there are things going on in society that doesn't look good for you, continue to run on the record. Down with the false conspiracies, the phantom boogeyman, these bogus theories of the great replacement. Just make the case, because whether a replacement is happening or not, and that's a question for another day, you still have minorities that stand with the Republican Party, that have conservative values. We just haven't seen them at the head of the party. We haven't seen them become the nominee. And we don't feel like it's because they're not qualified. We feel as if they haven't become the nominee based on the color of their skin, their ethnicity alone, not the qualifications. So in closing, we're looking for the solution, as always. We have to deal with harsh truths. If the truth be controversial, then controversy will rule the day. But we have to stand on truth, no matter how the Republicans try to spin it or cook it. But let them make the case. Democrats, we need to vote. Vote, vote, vote. Vote. And more voting. As Obama said, don't boo, vote. It'll take away the protest. It'll take away years of agony, frustration, setback, heartache, and pain, especially for minorities in this country. We have to vote. We have to have history on our side. The world is watching. So we have to have the world on our side. When we take a democratic government that we have became a part of, participate in it, so we can see the legitimacy of it or the illegitimacy of it. But regardless, when we vote, we have history on our side and we have the world on our side. So until the next time, stay vigilant, stay aware, get ready to vote. November is fast approaching. Make preparations in any shape, fashion, or form of all the ways that you could possibly vote. Go out and rock the vote. Rock the vote, as I said. Until the next time, this is Soluble signing off. We'd like to say peace, good night, and God bless.